Good afternoon, it's Graham Coath and it's my music, and today I'm talking to Matt Walker. Are you into gadgets? I presume you are, Matt.
I am.
With all of that. So yeah, there you go. That was an advert for our sponsor, Nextstand, who make a little gadget to lift your laptop screen up while you're on the go, and
yeah,
with whatever you're doing. Really important stuff to
Sure.
I have a background in ergonomics, so that's hence the connection between.
And my studio would give you a heart attack. Then it's not very ergonomic at the moment.
There you go. Well, maybe we need to send you a stand, and then we can get you a little bit more ergonomic. We'll get you all sorted out on that front.
Sure, I'll take one.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're here to talk. You said you like my background, by the way, which I've managed to magic up just before we went on air, which is the cover of your new album, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to talk me through it. I'll get out the way slightly for a second. Who's the figure in the center? Oh, this is great, by the way, for anyone that's listening on Spotify. So we'll describe it.
Right. Well, the artwork is done by an artist named Gregor Huber, who I came across on Instagram, and reached out to him because his artwork really spoke to me, and it felt really symbiotic with the music I was working on. So he created it. He slightly adjusted the artwork for this. He had some pieces already that I liked and asked if I could use. This piece, however, he did adjust, and the figure in the middle, I believe, is an Egyptian god for having to do with infinity. So the infinity line, obviously thematic. So but that's where that comes from.
Lovely. And has two. Is that two walking sticks that they're holding, or what are they? Staffs, probably.
I think they're staffs, and I have to say I don't know that I've analyzed it that deep. I just took a look at it and said, yes, that works.
Yeah. Well, I very much like it as well. So, Matt, we were talking just before we came on about sort of how you make your music and trying not to sound, in terms of the process at least, trying not to be sort of too push buttony and conformist when it comes to creating music. Even though anyone that listens to this album will clearly define it as within the electronic kind of genre. So for you, what keeps it fluid? What makes it a more fluid process rather than sort of joining the dots?
Well, there are a few things. I think that when you come up with an idea in the electronic world or the ambient world, you have to kind of decide how far you're going to take it, because there's no real to say something is finished or it's done. There's only you are going to be the person that knows that. So I might come up with an idea with a soft synth all in the computer and be like, well, that sounds good. That's interesting. And I like it. But then I think maybe I need to take it further and involve more of a process. I almost add the process on afterwards. So then I say, well, what if I try recreating that with one of my analog synths, or I try using a piano and run that through a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And inevitably, every time I make the effort to take it outside of the box and into the real world, where there's signal flow and there's circuitry, it always improves. Or to my ears, to my mind, it becomes a deeper piece of music. Just because there's just nuances and there's variables and there's things that are not so perfectly defined. So, but then again, I use both. So I might do that, and then I will continue on the computer and use other things in the computer that I like. So with these records that I'm making, I guess I have one in both worlds.
That's really interesting. So in a way, you sort of use the computer side of things in the first place to play around with maybe sounds or sort of just initial ideas, etc., and then you deconstruct that into putting that through playing that through a keyboard where you're playing it live or whatever, or trying to get a more real sound out of that.
Yeah,
record it again. So therefore, it's moving more towards analog, or it's more prone to real time mistakes or whatever. But that gives it the energy.
Yeah. I think that's another piece of the puzzle, is being in real time. For this kind of music, turning off the metronome, the click, and getting off of the grid. I can't say every piece I've done that, but I do it where I can, because I think that's important as well. So, but
that's interesting. And how much of that comes from your background as a drummer that's drummed with bands where you've played with other, you've needed to play with other musicians, and therefore, not everybody keeps good time all the time.
I'm not gonna name any names or whatever, but I guess the ironic part of what I just said is, for the better part of my drumming career, I've played live in the studio always to a click track, or like 90% of the time, even live, just for the consistency, and I guess gotten a lot of work because of my ability to be very precise.
Right.
So maybe that's why it feels good for me to kind of get away from that, in doing this type of music.
Yeah, but and as I say, we're not naming names, but you will have played with musicians where the timing element, you've got to, although you're being precise, within that group element, there will be some movement, because whenever you play with a group of musicians, especially when you play live, and depending on how good the sound is at the time, there will always be that movement. So in a way, you like that movement, and I think any musician kind of likes that kind of sort of trying to keep, it's that kind of juxtaposition between having something that's absolutely perfect, but having something that's got to be kept in rein as well, and got to be kept in check as it evolves, and it can change slightly. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to keep right.
It's actually fascinating because sometimes when I'm on tours, I will be the only one with hearing a click track. So none of the rest of the band doesn't hear it. They're relying on me for the meter, but everybody does have their own kind of interpretation of time and push and pull. And I remember often being frustrated, like, why is not everybody tighter, more precise? But then I realized that kind of takes the music out of music, or the feel out of it. And I need to really kind of embrace the sway and the push and the pull and the tension, and that it's not perfect, and that's a good thing. So I guess I've been kind of coming around over the years to that, more of that thinking. And so I don't know. I just feel like there's a balance to be had. And now it does seem, when I see newer groups or drummers, or just everything does seem overly perfected, overly quantized. And the music that I love most was likely not recorded to a click, or some of it may have been, but it was a much smaller component of the musical picture,
Yeah. And I guess as well that you've done in your past, you've done quite a lot of music with vocalists. Now, this is instrumental in the main. So the thing is, when you work with a vocalist gives sway to music anyway, in terms of that kind of timing and rhythm and stuff. And having been a vocalist myself, you could quite often look over your shoulder at the rest of the band and they're going like, he's not giving us the cue because he's changed it, oh man, why has he done that? Why has he put that word in there? Because that's just ruined it, but that is part of what makes that work. So in a way, in an essence, are you trying to, in some of the ways you form some of this music, are you trying to get sort of a vocal line, if you like, over the top of this electronic music in your head, but obviously through instrumentation rather than through a singing voice.
In my head, these pieces, even though they're textural, I don't even know if they're all considered ambient or not, but in my head, they're songs. Like I hear, and I don't know if other people pick this up or not, but for me, I do hear an arrangement. I hear a melody. It's like they're like shadows of songs, you know, like they could, with a little bit more production and a beat, you know, and a top line, it'd be a song. But I just have not, I've extracted all of that. So it's just kind of, like I said, it's like a shadow of a song. So, but yeah, I think that melody and chords are, I mean, there's a lot of really cool drony ambient music. But I find when I'm writing, I just still gravitate towards, I need like a harmonic quality that's emotive. And sometimes it might just be one chord, but more often than not, I need, that chord will only make sense when you get to the next one, you know, and then how the melody interacts with between those two chords, it's the interval. And I've actually tried to resist that temptation, because I was like, I'm making this ambient music, I should make it more, you know, passive, and I'm unable to. So it is what it is. It's what I make.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think it's good. I think it's good journey music. I actually think it's good traveling music. All right. And the reason
that's like the best that's exactly what I hoped people would take from it, to be honest.
Great.
Being on a train, looking out the window, or on a plane, or driving,
exactly
whatever it is, walking.
Yeah. Because what I like about it is, and there's other artists that, you know, when I used to do a lot more miles, I used to listen to similar ilk of stuff as well. And what I really like about this is that as you're, especially, you know, I put it in the car just now when I went out out in the car, and the snow was just beginning to fall here. It was getting cold. It was slightly dark, etc. I think this is the kind of music where you imagine the bits that aren't there in your head, and that's what I really love about it, because it's about, you're almost feeling, and it's got a kind of filmy soundtrack type thing to it as well, but not kind of a film soundtrack where it's just the stabs for this particular moment and the action. It's where you are making your own film in your head, if that makes sense. It's that kind of filmatic music where as you travel along and you're listening to this, you're almost imagining what could be a scene for this and what could be happening. And it works in that way for me. I think that's the kind of music it is, which I think is incredibly exciting.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice to hear, because again, that is how I imagine it. Because when I'm on tour, I listen to a lot of this type of music, and it's, you know, when you're writing any kind of song or making music, there's a part of you that wants to make something that makes other people feel that certain music made you feel. You know, you want to kind of like, there's a somehow or another, you know, it's not coming from nowhere, it's coming from somewhere in your experience and things that have inspired you or moved you. So I do want to be part of that cyclical process. So that's great.
And so in terms of influences on this or what you're doing now, how far does that go back? Because for me, this sort of music for me sort of started with, I remember buying Magnetic Fields by Jean-Michel Jarre.
Oh yeah.
On a tape, and wore it to pieces.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And I used to get taken to horse riding sessions that my sister was doing at the weekend, and I'd just get stuck in the car because she'd be off horse riding. My parents would be off watching it. I'd be thinking, I don't want to do that. But I had the car and I had the tape player, and I just used to put Magnetic Fields on and just imagine stuff, and just, you know, let that all of those beds just kind of circulate around, and you know, you'd be thinking of stories, thinking of things that you could could write over the top of this, etc.
Right.
So I mean, people like Jean-Michel Jarre and Tomitar, etc. They influences on you.
Absolutely, and Tangerine Dream as well, because they were doing soundtracks in the '80s to a lot of movies. Like there was a movie called Thief. I remember the soundtrack being really cool, and they did Risky Business too, which is also, the soundtrack is really cool. And but they were also a band, Tangerine Dream, and made their own records. And I always thought that was kind of a neat thing to be a band and then to also do soundtracks as the band entity, not as like a separate film composer. But I was also, when I was in high school, 16, 17, I would listen to Music for Airports by Brian Eno, and I would have all the lights off in my room, but my turntable, it was like a turntable tape deck all in one, and it had these two lights, and so all the room lights would be off in the room except for these two lights which looked like eyes, and I would just sit in the dark and listen to that record over and over and feel sorry for myself.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just feeling sorry for myself too. There's like that particular record, there's a lot of it, there's a hopeful, optimistic quality to it's just melancholy, which I generally gravitate towards.
Yeah. What was the first sort of synthesizers that you got into? What was the first bits of kit that you bought?
I don't know that I bought, but my dad's a pianist and a keyboardist, and so when I was growing up, he had I don't remember what model, but it was a small ARP synthesizer, which I used to love. He had a few other just weird keyboards, which I've never seen again, and I honestly don't even remember. I can picture them, but I don't know what they were. And he got rid of them long ago. But I did have the chance to tinker with them. And then a schoolmate of mine got a Roland Juno 60.
Right.
And that was so cool. He got rid of that too, which was a mistake, because those things right now, all that stuff is just a massive resurgence, as I'm sure you're aware of vintage analog keyboards, digital too.
Do you know what? It's so mad. All of those bits and pieces of kit that people had back then, and we all got rid of them because we bought the latest digital thing, etc.
I'm kicking myself too for some of the stuff I got rid of,
It was crazy, but at the same time, we actually picked up some bargains. I remember a mate of mine buying a Vox AC30 amp and whatever for like 20 quid because the guy had just updated to a lightweight sort of electric amp and was getting rid of his valve-based amps, etc. And it's like, well, it only needed a little bit of tender love and care, and it was up and running again. Right. But yeah, we had at school, we had like mini Moogs and stuff, which were great. And I can't remember, but we had one sort of like emulator panel thing as well with the cables where you had to patch the cables in order to get the different sounds.
Sure.
Wow. It was fantastic stuff.
It's great to be exposed to that. We had something similar at my school too. We had kind of an advanced jazz program, which I got a lot out of. But at some point, we were actually the school got sponsored by Roland, and so the drummers had the electronic kits, and the guitars had their early electronic guitars, and of course there was I think there was maybe 4 or 5 different keyboards. It was almost like a small jazz ensemble with synthesizer instruments. Yeah, it was incredible. Thinking back on now, that was so advance of the musical director be kind of pushing these, So that was in the late '80s. I guess it was kind of, part of becoming so popular in culture. So he just thought it'd be good to expose the students to that. It was cool though. Really cool.
No, definitely. Now you seem to have had quite a lot of fun on the visual side of this thing as well. I mean, we started off talking about the image for the front of the album, which you can see behind me. Well, you can't if you're on Spotify, but sorry about that, Spotify. One day Spotify will go imagery as well. But the videos from this particular album that you've released. You've got one for the Infinity line, which is certainly sort of like a cartoon or an illustrated piece. Again, who did that?
That's an artist named Patrick Burr, and again, somebody who I didn't know before coming upon his work online, and I thought so the visual aspect. One thing about it is that when I'm working, even in the working process, sometimes I'll spend some time compiling images, still images and film that seem to work with what I'm working on. So it's almost like a palette, and I have them up on my desktop, and they seem to kind of like, inspire and influence the work. It just kind of like flavors it. Then when I think about making a video, I like making videos myself. I've made a lot as well, filming and directing and editing. But it's a little hard to do with the pandemic for one, and I also wanted something that was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So I was searching online for some inspiration. I came across this artist Patrick Burr, and he had made this short film, hand animated. Now, which I'm forgetting the original title of, the train, the train in the forest, I think. And I reached out to him. I said, I have this song that the visuals for this video would work great. Do you think we could almost like reimagine it for the song? And he was open to it. So he tinkered around with it and came up with a new version. That's how that video came to be. Yeah.
It's great. It's got an energy of its own, hasn't it? Outside of listening to it.
Yeah.
On the album.
The videos are really important to me, and I love videos. I do also understand the school of thought where when you do make a visual kind of symbol of your song, you're offering a very specific now view of what the song is. So you're taking away some of the interpretation that might have been open otherwise. And I recognize that. So I guess, but I did anyway.
You're the guy that wrote it in the first place. I think you're entitled to do that. And there is something kind of magical though when a great visual piece and music all kind of come together. So I feel like that's a worthy pursuit as well. Yeah. Oh well, I'd like to think that most people listening to your music are probably intelligent enough to be able to differentiate between the two and actually see, that works as it is there, as that visual with that the music behind it. But actually, when I'm listening to it in the car or when I'm listening to it, relaxing on the bed or whatever else, that I can imagine a completely different landscape to that or a different visual to that. Yeah. So that's
good. Good.
I think that's just down to intelligence at the time.
I like to think that there's some intelligence required in getting the most out of this music,
Yeah. And the other video, Anira, which is a Russian name, is it?
It is. It's kind of a play on this other kind of sci-fi. It's a long form poem called Anira. And it's I forget the author's name. He's Swedish, but it's a beautiful long form sci-fi poem. It was recently, it was made into maybe a musical, and I think may have now been made into a movie, which I haven't seen.
Yeah, well, I found it online. Yeah. I found it online.
Oh, you did?
2019. It's a Russian language film.
Yeah, so it was just I saw the name and I saw the poem and I did really love it. And I thought about just using that title because I often search poetry and stuff. The titles are really important to me, but there was too much going on with it, so I just kind of modified the word because sometimes for me even the title, just like the letters in the title and all of it, whether it's one word or 5 words, to me it's as important as anything else. When because when you're like checking out music and you look at, what's this song? And you look at that might be the first visual connection you make to the song. I don't know. Maybe I put too much into it, but I think it's important. So that's the title. is not specific, but draw some inspiration from any era.
Yeah. Well, it's a good piece to draw inspiration from. If you haven't seen the clips from the film, you should go and see go and see the clips from the film, and you'd be like, "Well, I should have written the music for this film." You will be saying that.
Wait, have you seen the film? You haven't seen the
film. I've seen bits of it, and it's got quite an electronic, dark soundtrack, and you will be saying, "Oh yeah, they should have used me," but there you go.
So be it. Yeah,
but yeah, it's a good looking film. So it's it's not a bad thing to be associated with by any stretch of the imagination. Now this is part of a trilogy of albums.
Right.
So the third one's in progress at the moment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay. And this is called the Monomyth trilogy. So again, I love that word because, and when they sent me the photos of you for promotion, you basically built a little monolith next to you in these bricks. So what's the story there? I mean, immediately to mind comes Kubrick, etc. But I mean, anything to do with.
Well, he's a huge influence, and for those particular promo photos, I did reference him. But the monomyth, the monomyth comes from. Excuse me, I think I need some water, but all I have is coffee, so it'll have to be coffee. But
that's okay. I have green tea, so there you go. Cheers.
Cheers. So the name the moniker that I work under, of 1,000 Faces, is partially comes from Joseph Campbell, the writer, and he has the hero of 1,000 Faces, a journey, a hero's journey, and hero of 1,000 Faces, and that plays. I think he calls his analysis of this hero's journey that's prominent in so many cultures as the monomyth. So that's kind of where that originally comes from, and which also ties into the inspiration for the band name that I have. And I was just looking for something that kind of like tie it all together, and it seemed to make sense, and it also being a journey, and also there's several parts to the hero's journey. I think in different analysis there's longer versions and shorter versions, but for me it worked as a trilogy. It's an interesting topic if you read about it online.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So the first album differs slightly from the second album in terms of sort of light and shade, etc., and sort of rhythmic elements. What can you say anything about what we expect to see from the third one?
I always have an idea of what it's going to be, and it invariably changes once I'm into it, which has happened with so far with the first two records. There's a quote, Brian he prefers to shoot the arrow and then paint the target around it. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, he's good for some good. He's got some good ones. So I'm in the midst, and I know what I want. I want the second record, the Infinity Line, the one that you have the artwork there for, it is definitely darker than the first. And I do hope that this one is a lighter, more hopeful, optimistic, and I also intend for it to be longer pieces. And so far in my work for it, there's been a slightly different writing process. Like I've been organizing my equipment to perform and improvise more than I did on the other two.
Yep.
So that once I have a sound, a couple of instruments, all with the sounds I like, I can just start recording and improvise I've got some that are like 30, 40 minutes, and I don't know if I'll edit it down. Maybe I'll have them be really long. I'm still figuring it out, but
Oh, this last one's going to be your prog album.
There's a little prog in everything I do, if you haven't noticed.
yeah. Well, there you go. One of my favorite prog bands, Marillion, actually did a song called "A Man of a Thousand Faces." So there you go. There's a little
connection.
There's a connection there. We found the prog connection. Well, no, everything has to have a little bit of prog in it, I think. Again, it's about intelligence and music, isn't it? Really. Yeah. Do you ever, after having done all of this and put these three complete works out, do you think you'll go back to a band at some point, and a more sort of typical 3-4 minute song connection?
No, I have the next 3 or possibly 4 projects after the ambient trilogy are actually I've been deep working on at the same time, and in a way, doing the ambient music was a kind of, it's hard to, I don't know if I can articulate this right, but I wanted to kind of set the stage for some of this other music that I write, which is more song oriented. It is song oriented with features a lot of guest singers and things like that. I mean, I have released some music of this nature already. There's a few releases. There's a song called "Sleepings for Dreamers" with Jimmy Necco from Hours singing, and another song called "Month Day Year" with Brandon Robbins singing. So the stuff that's going to come after the ambient record is more a continuation of that. But there are a variety of reasons why I chose to just kind of like step away from that approach to the song stuff and do the ambient now. The pandemic obviously was part of it, the headspace everybody was in, and something I'd kind of like thought on doing for a long time, and I just decided it was time to like commit.
Well, we're glad you did.
I am too. It feels good to complete things. It's sometimes a difficult task. So,
I think you probably like the structure in the whole project as well. Then the talking about what we were saying earlier, the fact that you've got this, you set off to write a trilogy in a way that gives you that overall structure. When there's a start and an end to this, and where that, as you say, it's a moving target per se. But
no, that's right.
It still has some boundaries to it, which are quite useful when you're writing music.
It is, I think, for artistic people to have some parameters. I think having no parameters sends a lot of people into like a state of panic, and probably myself included. I create so much music, and I have so much music that I've just not been focused enough to release, or I know I'm not the only one that suffers from it. So even if it's just you creating the parameters, say, I'm going to record a trilogy, I'm going to record this record, and this is the release date, and especially with an independent artist, you have to self-impose all these deadlines that nobody else is going to do for you. So it takes a little bit of discipline, but you learn as you go.
Lovely. Well, Matt, you've been an absolute pleasure to talk to. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me about your music today. Thanks for having me. No,
thanks for having me.
It's
great.
It's good. In terms of one thing that you've perhaps haven't done in your career yet that you're not going to achieve in this project, but would stand in the future, what would that be?
Oh, that's an open-ended question. All 10 things rush to mind at the same time. Well, I guess what I haven't really done, it is actually though with this project. I mean, the other thing about Of a Thousand Faces is that I knew in the beginning I wanted to make all different kinds of music with all different kinds of groups of musicians. So I do want to get a live ensemble together and write as a live ensemble. I assume it'll be under Of a Thousand Faces, and go out and tour on that. I've toured with so many people as the drummer. I'll probably play drums, but other instruments, but I would like to take my own work on the road.
That would be great.
Maybe 2022.
Yeah. And the t-shirts will be cool. That's the other
t-shirts
thing.
would be cool.
Let's face it, the t-shirts will be really cool, because I presume you'll have some of this on the t-shirts.
Oh yeah. I don't have it yet, but I do intend on having these 3 album covers on some merch, as well as there's talk of vinyl releases as well later in the year. So actually, there's a specific thing happening with the vinyl, which I can't even say yet, but
that sounds exciting. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Lovely. And that's, well, again, that's an exciting thing for anyone that's produced predominantly electronic music as well, is to get that onto vinyl.
Yeah.
Where, again, it's not as
no, right.
It breathes a different ambience, again, because it is on vinyl. And that was always something, you know, when I first listened to, again, you know, some of the electronic music that I loved growing up, but you heard it on vinyl away from sort of tape or whatever, and it wasn't quite as, you know, there was a little bit more static in it, and there was a little bit more. You could hear some clunks, you know,
imperfections.
You hear those imperfections, yeah. And it gives it another life. So yeah, that would be really exciting to get this stuff on vinyl as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. As I say, thanks very much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed it yourself as well. And you know, I look forward to hearing the next album when it comes out.
You'll hear it pretty soon, hopefully. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Bye for now.